So I'm here with Gaston Albergotti. Gaston has been one of my best friends since second grade. And we've had a lot of fun together, gotten in a lot of trouble together, played a lot of baseball together. And then we got old and boring and decided we had to make money. And then we ended up buying a lot of real estate together. So it's been quite the journey since second grade.
Yep, from beating Jaron on the kickball field, now doing real estate deals together. It's been a fun ride.
Oh my gosh, dude! Nobody beat me on the kickball field. Nobody beat me on the basketball court. You got me in tennis, and you got me in ping pong, and you don't even have me in ping pong anymore. You had me in ping pong when we were younger.
You finally got me back on that,
and you got me in golf. So whatever. But if we Gaston's gotten soft. Like he's gotten soft in his old. He's a dad and a husband, and he needs to hit the gym more. He just said he hadn't worked out in like 6 months. So if I get him on the court, I think I could push him around a little bit. I don't know. The last time we did play basketball, though, you totally broke my ankle right before I went back to college for my sophomore season.
You're right.
Probably
would have been in the MLB if that didn't happen.
That's the story between you and my buddy Grande, which Grande. He hurt my shoulder in high school. Like I'd probably be in the major leagues, not doing this podcast right now if it weren't for you two guys. But
well, I'm glad you're in real estate.
It's been quite the journey. I always tell people, especially my mentorship, like my group. And then, I try to tell it on podcasts. Your name is out in the real estate atmosphere. Like it's out there because I tell folks you were mentoring me in real estate from 2013 to 18, 19, 20, still today, but really hardcore starting in 2013 because you got into real estate right when we graduated college. I didn't. And you went out, and I want you to tell your story, so I won't steal your thunder, but essentially you were a bird dog. You were figuring out real estate, and we were just talking as friends. Like I was newly married, you weren't married, didn't have kids, so we would talk all the time, and you were telling me all these real estate stories, and that for 5 years you were mentoring me without knowing it. You weren't it wasn't like, oh, I'm your mentor. It's like, I found this deal. This is how I structured it. I'm like, what? You can do that? And you're like, yeah, I didn't know that either. And you look at real estate, and there was so many crazy things that allowed you to become unbelievably wealthy at a very, very young age.
Yep, and I had great mentors as well, and I think we'll talk more about that later. But yeah, I got into real estate right out of school. I got really lucky. I had a father who encouraged me to do that, and we had a family friend who my dad looked at, and he's like, this guy, all he does is play golf and makes a bunch of money and doesn't really do anything for work. You ought to do commercial real estate too. I'm like, yeah, that sounds good to me. I think I ought to try that. And so I got hooked up with this guy that hired me to help him grow his investment real estate game. And he was making a transition from doing retail sales and leasing as a commercial real estate broker to buying his own deals and buying rental houses was the main way he was going to do that because it was such a low barrier to entry in the rental house world.
Yep.
And it was 2014, and we hit the ground running. It was a lot of fun.
Dude, I remember that. Because I think I remember back, you were you thought you may do insurance. You had done Cutco sales, which we'll try to implement that into how that's helped you been successful too. Because what a terrible job! But I mean, it's great for you.
Oh yeah,
obviously, but a terrible job. Yeah, and you had come out the ROTC, so you had opportunities there. So it's pretty cool to see how I know your story. You've ended up with Jake and that team, and how you guys have grown it. But what did so you come out of college? What did your first role look like? And then talk about too, why real estate. I mean, you mentioned it, your dad was like, hey, this guy plays golf all the time. Let's do this. But knowing you, I don't think you grew up like, oh, I can't wait to buy real estate. I know I did. And it wasn't just like, oh, I can't wait to graduate so I can go build this big portfolio,
Oh yeah. It was, so I bought my first rental house out of just fear for job security. So I got hired by these two guys, and my first role was working directly with this guy, Jake, who I still work with today. And he literally gave me a neighborhood, 4 roads on each side, and said, I want to own every single house in this neighborhood. And it was near downtown Greenville, which was a growing market at the time. And so every day he would drive through, and he'd point at a house, and he'd say, who owns this house? Why haven't we bought it?
Wow.
And so there was zero excuse not to call every single property owner. And of course, some of them wouldn't sell. Some of them yelled at me. Some of them cussed me out. But I called every last one of them. And we probably Jake ended up owning about 30% of the neighborhood.
Wow.
And, so it was really cool. And then, he kind of bought all these houses and waited. The market got right. Then he started flipping them. Made a little bit of money on the first ones, made a bunch of money on the last ones. And, but like 3 months into that job, I was about to go off to Army school up in Virginia. So I was on the job for 3 months, and then I was going to have a 3.5 month Army training up at Fort Lee, Virginia. And while I was there, Jake called me and said, "Hey, remember that house that you found right before you left, $32,000? Bill and I are going to buy it. Do you want to come in for a third?" And I was like, "Okay, let me pray about this. Let me sleep on it. Let me talk to my parents."
Was this your first one?
This was my first one.
Oh, that feeling. There's a lot of listeners who are at that spot.
Oh yeah.
Currently, we are both on a lot of real estate. Gaston owns a lot more than I do. We were there, and we can remember that feeling.
Oh, it's scary. I lost sleep. I said, "Man, if all fails and this house, burns to the ground and we don't have insurance, like I could pay my third of the mortgage off, and I would not go bankrupt." And so that's what ended up, like, it was job security. My two bosses, wanted me to buy this house with them. And I thought that'd be a good career move. And I had no interest in buying real estate, truly, at that time. And
you just wanted to broker.
I just wanted a job. I wanted
buy and sell, like list, be a buyer's agent.
Yeah, I had every intent of just, Jake can buy all the real estate he wants, and I'll keep finding him deals, and that'll be a good job for me. So, but yeah, and then so we bought that house, and Jake walked me through the whole thing. I didn't have to deal with the mortgage or the insurance or the inspections or anything like that. And so I learned a little bit from that. And then lo and behold, the lot next door comes up for sale. And so I'm driving by it one day, and there's a sign in the yard that says owner financing, lot for sale. So I called Jake. I'm like, "I don't have any money, but we have to buy this lot. It's right next door. We can subdivide it into two." I'd kind of worked with a couple of builders at that point as clients who had taught me zoning laws. And so I'd figured out, all right, according to the acreage, it's right on the line, but we can subdivide this and we can have 3 lots next door to each other. So we ended up buying that. We got the deal worked out at $13,000 for this lot next door. Wow. And it was $1,000 a month. So my third of it was $333, and it just wore me out paying that $300 a month.
That's like all you had.
That's all I had. I was eating Cheetos for dinner, and it just wore me slap out. But it was well worth it in the end.
How'd it turn out in the long run?
So today there's 3 $400,000 houses sitting on those 3 lots. We ended up selling the rental house and the 2 lots to another investor, who then tore them down, did the actual subdivision, and sold it to a builder. So we left a little bit of meat on the bone, but we 1031 exchanged that deal into, I forget what exactly, but another rental home portfolio in a different neighborhood of Greenville. And so that partnership still lives.
That's awesome. Absolutely crushing it. So jumping back to you finding these deals in that neighborhood, a lot of folks struggle. I think we all can, because it can be tough with lead generation.
Mm-hmm.
So you got somebody who wants to say, okay, like, how do I pick this neighborhood, and then what do I do? How do I get a hold of these people? Like, software you used, how you got their numbers, what you would say when you called them, all that. Yeah,
so that's the hardest part of the business, right? And it's the way that anybody can be successful in this business is mastering that skill. The money part, relatively easy. It's the finding the deals, because real estate, you make your money when you buy, right? And so I was taught that early on, and so I figured, hey, if I can find the deal, then I've got a place in this industry. And all the old guys were set in their ways, and they hadn't cold calls in 20 years, and so I said, I'll be that guy. And then, people could bring me in on deals, pay me commissions, whatever it is. And, but I was lucky. I had Jake tell me at that time what neighborhoods to call on. But I started figuring out, hey, this neighborhood is similar to this neighborhood. And so I said, I know this is a good neighborhood to buy in. I think we should go one neighborhood over, but hey, we're going to skip this neighborhood because the infrastructure's not good. The roads are terrible. I just don't see a future here. And so I think, growth markets, obviously, you about can't go wrong in a good economy in a growth market. But I think, one of our favorite neighborhoods that we ended up doing a ton of business in it was just grid style, and it was an old mill village, and there were 4 streets with alleyways in the backyards. And so each house had a front yard, driveway coming off the front, and then a garage in the back off this alleyway. I'm like, that is a cool place to live. Like, I wish I could buy a house and live in this neighborhood. And so that was one of the reasons we picked that neighborhood. And, we ended up probably doing 60, 70 houses in that neighborhood. And so I think it's all about access. Can you get in and out easily? Can you get to Target easily? Can you get to a grocery store? Hospitals, great. It's always good to buy around hospitals. Where's your workforce? What we missed the boat on was we were buying all downtown properties, and we could have made a ton of money if we had just figured out earlier on that you could buy the suburban houses where the workers wanted to live, and those rental prices have really gone up higher than even the downtown property.
Wow, that's interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Which you brought me a suburban property, which my first property I ever bought.
That's right.
And we'll talk about that in a minute. So how did you get a hold of these people? So you chose those neighborhoods. How'd you find their contact information? A lot of people are like, well, how do I know where to find them?
Yeah, so it's becoming harder and harder, right? As when I started in 2014, a certain sector of the population still had home phones. And so I would find their home phone number. I'd do white pages. I had a couple of different subscriptions that I tried over the years to find these phone numbers. But generally speaking, what I would do is look them up on white pages, look them up in the phone book. If I couldn't find them there, then I would Google them, try to figure out where they worked. I would call them at work. And so I had a lot of success that way, but also just door knocked. I mean, I was getting houses pointed to me by Jake, like, you got to buy this house. And so, I was going to go to their house. Like, if they lived within a 100-mile radius, I was going to show up at their house if I couldn't find a phone number for them. So I did a lot of door knocking. I asked neighbors, a lot of these neighborhoods, you just get to know people, and they're like, well, you ought to call, Miss Mitchell, she'll sell. And so then you'd say, all right, well, can I get her phone number? Tell me where she lives. And so you kind of just work up a network. But yeah, there's a couple of good softwares out there. There's a couple of really good, websites that you can subscribe to. But I think you just can't beat old fashioned hustle.
Yep.
And, these people are there, and they of course aren't dying to sell, but the hardest part about it is getting them on the phone, getting a hold of them. So that's just hard work.
Yeah. You got to put in the time. One app that I have found that's good for pulling contacts, because there's a lot of bad ones.
Yes.
Skip Better is one that I've seen does a little better than some of the others. But again, knocking on doors, Facebook. Social media is more powerful probably than calling them.
It is
today.
Done a ton of deals on Facebook.
Yep.
Done a ton of deals by text, not automated text. We found that doesn't work all that well. But letters and actual text messages. Leave a voicemail and then text them. Say, I just left you a voicemail. That way they know you're a real person.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, everybody, dude, I get blown up with wholesaler automated text. I will say though, one of them got me to sell. But they text me for probably a year. I don't know how much they spent to get a hold of me. And I was probably in this office one day, and they text me, and I was like, God dang it, I wish they'd leave me alone. So I just sent back a number. I bought, it was the first property. You led me to this property. So Gaston helped me get my first property. He brought it to me. It was on 407 Crosby Circle, off Pleasantburg, right?
Yep.
And in Greenville, South Carolina, I bought it for $68,000. I don't know. I put 15 in it or so. And I ended up selling it to this wholesaler for $140,000 4 years later.
Not bad.
No, I pretty much double my money in 4 years. So that's what, 70, what is that? 70 grand, call it I made. You do 70 divided by 4, what's that per year? If you broke that down to a yearly salary, you know, it's like 18 grand or something, 17.
17, yeah.
It's like, that's not too shabby, but you have to buy to do it.
And you put that on a cash return because you had leverage on it, and you absolutely crushed it on that deal. And that deal almost didn't happen. And I was in the hospital with a family member at closing day, and the seller called me, who was a friend of mine.
I forgot about this.
And so the guy called me, says, I'm not going to move forward. There's something about, it was $500 was being argued about. And I'm like, I'm sitting in the hospital, and I'm like, I can't deal with this right now. I'm like, if you walk away over $500, I will never speak to you again. Like, you're a friend of mine. This is unreasonable. Everybody's been reasonable on both sides of this deal. Like, I'm not going to Jaron for an extra $500. And so you're just going to have to eat it. And so he called me back. I hung up on him. He called me back. He's like, you're right. I'm going to do the deal. So Jaron, you might have walked away over $500. We don't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't have.
It was tight.
I don't know. Maybe at the time I probably would have.
You don't know. But I wasn't going to put you in that position.
I would never leave a deal for $500. I'm glad you didn't tell me.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever. That may be the first time I've ever heard that story.
Yep.
I remember from my point of view wanting to back out.
Yeah.
Just out of fear. You're talking about that first property you bought. I remember being so freaking scared. You told me all your stories for all these years. I'd listened to all the Bigger Pockets, read all the books. I knew, like, you brought me this deal. It was cash flowing. It was in an area that was booming, and I still wanted to back out.
Still terrifying.
So terrifying.
Because you work so hard for your money.
Yep.
And you don't want to put it at risk. And all you hear, growing up is put your money in the stock market, put your money in mutual funds, put your money, keep it in the bank, keep an emergency fund.
Yeah, how's that work out for some people in the bank? Of course, I guess they're back now anyways.
Yeah, hopefully they'll be all right. We won't comment too much on that unless we want to get political.
We can get political, baby. We'll spice it up in here.
But yeah, so, I mean, it's terrifying to buy your first deal, but it is well worth it. And the hardest part is just doing it. But, you also want to have a plan to scale. And, I think scale is the key in this industry because, that first rental house, if you didn't have a stable income, there were some surprises, right? You had to spend some money that you weren't planning on.
Exactly.
We had a code violation that I learned about on that deal, that you couldn't have a front door in that neighborhood that didn't face the street, and
that one didn't,
and it didn't.
Yeah.
And so therefore you couldn't add on or something like that.
Yeah.
And so learn from every deal, but make sure you have a plan to scale, so that some kind of little surprise on one deal doesn't hurt you on your entire portfolio.
Exactly. And that's a good point, because I get a lot of DMs, messages, emails from people saying, hey, can you help me invest in real estate? And one of the first questions I ask is, how are your personal finances?
Yep.
Well, I'm still getting rid of credit card debt. You got an emergency fund in place? No, I got a couple grand in the bank. I was like, you're not buying real estate, or you're not getting in my mentorship to learn how to buy real estate because you're not ready. And I've been there. You're not a bad person. There's nothing wrong. I spent 2013 to 2018, when I'm hearing all your deals, I was cleaning my finances up. I had over $60,000 in student loan debt. I had truck debt. I had wedding ring debt, and I was not in a place to buy real estate. Listen, real estate is not a broke person's game.
No,
it isn't. I'm sorry. It isn't. You don't have to be wealthy to start. Okay. So let me make it clear. You don't have to be wealthy to start. You need a good foundation. So I'm not saying all your debt's got to be gone. Okay. There's a good argument for that. Gaston would argue with me that it doesn't. And so I understand that. For me, that's kind of the way I went about it. Other than, I think I had a little bit of vehicle debt when we started, but I had a strong foundation. Like, I didn't have credit card debts anymore. I got rid of student loans, and then I had an emergency fund for my personal life. And then it was like, okay, now I don't have any more of my income going to other places. I can buy real estate and focus my income on that. Number one, to buy it. But also, like you said, if something comes up and it's a big expense. Now, since I have shifted to buying a lot using the Burr method, and I feel like I've done a really good job with it. You can't do that with every deal. You can't do it with every deal. But I have been able to do it with a lot of deals moving forward from those first few properties I bought. And the beautiful thing about that is if you do it right, you can cover a lot of that expensive stuff on the front end with somebody else's money or with the credit line or with your own cash, and then pay yourself back. And then that cash on cash return skyrockets, and you don't have cash sunk in the deal. And then you don't have to worry about those big expenses later. But it's like, you've talked about before, Burr deals are harder to find. Like,
oh yeah.
Especially in this market.
And lenders have tightened up, and so you're not getting as high of leverage as you used to get. And so, we used to do deals where we would get cash back at closing.
You remember that?
Oh yeah.
The first couple of deals we did, you're like giving me a check. I was like, what is, because they would lend to us on the appraised value.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah. There was one lender that we worked with that would do a 85% of LTV on appraised value.
And so just to clarify, for newbies listening to this, banks usually will lend 80%, I would say, is the norm on the purchase price.
That's right.
Not the appraised value, the purchase price. But what Gas is saying is we found such good deals and got them under contract, the purchase price low, to where when the appraisal came, then Don was lending us 85% off that appraised value, which was higher.
Yeah, which was huge for us at the time. And we were doing a lot of these were construction projects where you're going in, you're spending 20, 30 grand, and you were telling the lender, hey, here's my plan, here's my quotes from my contractor. This house is going to be worth X once that work is done. And so you're buying it, but he was loaning us the money on the front end at purchase.
Crazy.
To spend the money on the contractor services. And a lot of times if you could save money on the contractor services, then you're getting a check back, which was awesome. So that helped us scale for sure.
It did.
But yeah, the Burr method is awesome. The Burr method, there's absolutely no better method when you're short on cash and when you're trying to scale your portfolio, because it's even if you get 80%, you're putting 20% down after the fact, like you're still able to get a stabilized property, for a very little cash down, which is huge.
It's awesome. And for those listening that don't know what it is, Burr stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. So you're going to buy a property in cash usually with somebody else's money, private lender's money, hard money lender money, mix of both, your own HELOC, your own cash, and you're going to buy it in full cash, and then you're going to rehab it. Okay. And then you're going to get a renter in place, which you don't have to get a renter in place. They put that R for rent in the method, but I've refinanced a ton of properties without ever getting a renter in place. So we could argue that point. But anyways, so then you've bought this property undervalued. You got to buy an undervalued deal, and then you've rehabbed it. Now we're going to go to the bank, right? We own it cash, whether it's our cash, private lender, hard money lender, and we're going to go to a bank and say, hey, we want to put a loan on it with you. And so the bank's going to order a new appraisal. And since you rehab the property, it should be worth more. Then the bank's going to loan you 80% roughly. Some banks 85, some banks 75, some banks 70 of the new appraised value. And they're going to write you a check for that amount because you're doing what's called a cash out refinance. You're going to take that check and then you're going to pay your private lender back, your hard money lender back, yourself back, wherever you got the capital. And if you do it right, you can get into deals without using any of your own money. I've got into deals with the Burr method without using any of my own money, pretty much breaking even. I've got into deals where at the end it ended up costing me $4 to $5 grand, and the last one I did, I got paid $11 grand because I bought it so undervalued.
That's awesome.
And so there's a lot of different ways to go with it, but I talk about it a lot because it's allowed me to scale. But it's not the only method, and there's a lot of ways to buy real estate. There's nothing wrong with spending 20% to put a down payment on real estate, No,
nothing wrong at all. And, another way would be to get partners and get in on deals that you can't afford because you've got partners. And, a lot of times if you're the one finding the deal, you can get your partners to loan you the down payment and let the deal pay them back with interest. And so I've done a lot of that. I got into a 50 home portfolio that way where I found the deal, and they came to me and said, if you can get half of your share, we'll loan you the other half for finding the deal. And so that was huge for me. I got my sister to loan me my half that I had to come up with, and the partnership loaned me the other half. And, and the deal went really, really well, and we had everybody paid back within 6 months.
Wow, dude, that's awesome. That's a solid deal. You guys got a knack for doing that. But what people don't realize is they hear you, oh, I found this great deal. But how many deals did you look at before?
Tons. And I tell you what, on that deal is we tried to sell it to everybody in town.
Really?
So we were still trying to just be brokers at that point. And so we sat down with all the major real estate players in Greenville, and we said, hey, we've got this portfolio. It's a great neighborhood. It's up and coming. It's across from the hospital. It's, a $25,000 a door price point, tenants in place, cash flowing. Like it was a no-brainer deal. And every one of them told us no. And finally, I would have, of course, just walked away. I didn't know anything. But Jake said, well, we're just going to do this deal ourselves. And so he goes out and gets 2 other investors. And we did the deal ourselves, and I ended up with 25% of the deal, which was awesome.
That played out good in the long run, huh?
Oh, yeah.
See, you said this earlier. Guys, the key to real estate is if you can find deals, the rest comes together. I told you I got to get a neon sign above your head.
Yeah.
You know what I'm getting? And I'm going to trademark this. If anybody beats me to it, then I'm going to hunt you down. Find deals, get money.
Find deals, get paid.
If you find deals, or get paid. If you can find the deals, the money, the funding is the easy part. I always say there's 7 billion people on planet Earth, over 330 million in the U.S. You can find one person to give you the funding.
Yeah, and all you have to do is be a believable, trustworthy person, because there's a lot of people out there that their emergency fund is sitting in the stock market, and they're hoping it does 6%. And if it does 8%, great. We're really happy. And, it may be sitting in the bank getting now 3%, but over the last few years getting 0.5%. And those people will be more than happy to help you. And especially if you can beat the market, if you can give them 10%, if you can give them 12%, short-term loans, give them an origination point. Like, there are people you just have to ask, and you have to be a likable, trustworthy person, because you have to build up your credit with that person. And so the hardest one's the first one. After that, you get them paid back, you get their interest in hand, they're ready to rinse and repeat, because now your credit's a little bit better. Maybe you can do 9% on the next one.
Yep.
But there's money everywhere. And that's something I had to learn the hard way. I had no idea. I was always worried about the money. And Jake taught me that, hey, money is bountiful. It's a scarce resource, but everybody's chasing a return.
And you guys have been great at proving that concept. You're not just sitting here talking about it. I've done it on a very, very, very small scale of just single family homes. You guys have done it on which we'll talk about in a little bit, a very large scale. But if you can find those deals, do what you say you're going to do, people will loan you. And if anybody's listening wondering, well, how do I structure those deals? So if I want to go find private, money, and if you want a guide for how to find private money, go on my Instagram and DM me the word key, Key, and I'll send you a guide. It'll kind of help you out. But as far as structuring it, we can sit here and talk for hours on how to structure deals, because it's so subjective for every deal. But when folks are asking me, like, what's a good base point, this is what I tell them. And you feel free to input on this and change my mind on it. I tell them a year loan, so a bridge loan, 365 days. You do not have to pay this person back for 365 days. Somewhere, you're probably going to be somewhere between 8 to 15% in interest. But like you said, you want to make it advantageous for the person.
Right.
Because they need to make money, and you want them to come back. So probably somewhere between 10 to 12%. And then you're paying that interest. It's amortized, right? So a lot of people think, let's say you give me a $200,000 loan. They think if we do 10% interest, I automatically give you 20 grand.
Right.
Right. That's not how it's set up. Most of them, amortize over 30 years, right?
Private loans, I would say, are 20 years generally is what I see.
20. Okay.
But yeah, you're paying down some principal along the way. Yep.
And sometimes it's interest only though. You may do,
a short-term deal, you may do interest only, and you may just have
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Just on the bridge loans.
Yeah. Just have it accrue, and you're paying them back at the end of the term. So if you've got a year to pay them back, and you were loaned $100,000, paying back 110 grand
Yep.
at the end, and you're not making payments along the way, which helps your deal and helps your personal cash flow.
Yeah.
So that's the way we see it a lot. You know, bigger deals, we'll see an interest carry in the deal where we'll give them 10% of the profit of the deal, something like that, in addition to their, you know, maybe a lower interest rate. So there's 1,000 ways to do it. I always did it with my sister of, hey, I'll pay you 8%. There is no prepayment penalty, but I will make sure that you get at least, you know, X amount, $2,000, $2,500 of interest to make it worth your time. Because she was loaning me like $30,000. It was smaller amounts, and you know, you want it to be worth their time to do that.
That's smart. And you may too, Gaston mentioned, you want to accrue the interest if possible and pay it when the loan matures or whenever you're paying them back. But it's not always feasible to do that. Some lenders are going to make you pay interest monthly. So it's not the worst thing in the world, you know, if you have to pay a private lender monthly while you're working on a project. But if you can do like Gaston said and just accrue that interest and pay it back at the end, that lowers your holding cost and it just, you know, removes that from the table. So anytime you can set that up, do it. And then, you know, obviously, you know, this is getting in the weeds here, but when you're collateralizing stuff, if you can just make the home or the properties, and I'm talking on smaller deals. If we're talking about big commercial deals, it's a totally different topic. But if you're getting somebody to lend you out for one single family home, try to make that home collateral and not have to personally guarantee that loan. You're probably going to have to, but if you can just make the home collateral and you don't say, hey, no matter what happens, I personally guarantee you I'll pay this loan back, you only put yourself in the driver's seat should crap hit the fan.
Yep. But you know, in order to get that, you're probably going to have to put some cash down of your own. Yeah. Nobody's going to do a 100% loan on a house that is not personally guaranteed because they don't know what the house is worth. Otherwise, they'd be buying it.
They'd be buying it unless they just don't like real estate.
But if you're willing to put, you know, 70% or 30% down, get a 70% loan from somebody, like, of course, I would loan money on that because if you default, I just made 30%.
Yeah.
So
pretty good. And you got a property.
Yeah, and that person just gets to walk away, which is a win.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many different ways to do these deals. I love it. Let's talk about that deal that we're doing right now. That's been an absolute disaster. You probably remember the details better. I'm a terrible detail guy.
Oh man!
But we bought this property for what? And it was in a package deal, but we valued it at what, 80 or something?
Yeah, I think we allocated $80,000 to it. We bought it in a package of 3 homes. And it was another one. It was a door knock. I wanted to buy. We're trying to get in this one particular neighborhood outside of downtown in our hometown. Oh. And we wanted to buy all these houses on this block. And so this particular
block too.
This particular guy owned 2 of them. And so he was high on my list. And so I chased him down at his car dealership that he owned. He owned a used car dealership. And first time I went there, he stood me up. I'd called him. He said, yeah, come at this time. And I show up. And he's not there. And his assistant's like, yeah, he ain't coming. So I'm like, all right, well, you know, okay, I'll call him. So I called him. He's like, yeah, my bad. You know, I'll be there, you know, tomorrow or whatever. So I drove back, you know, it's a 45-minute drive, but I came back and we worked out a deal on the spot for 3 houses. He wanted to get rid of this 3rd house, which was actually the best one, or so we thought. And so we allocated $80,000 to this house, you know, maybe 30 for another one and like 10 for this last one. That's the whole story in and of itself. So anyway, this $80,000 house, we get, you know, we've had a couple of tenants. We've probably owned it for 3 or 4 years now. Pretty stable house. It's in a good neighborhood, 2-bedroom house. You know, we both grew up right around the corner from this house and like would take family walks by it. So good location, but probably the roughest house on the street, which, you know, generally is a good thing for investors. Yep. And so anyway, a few years goes by and about a year ago now, I would say, I get this anonymous letter in the mail that says, you know, from your neighbors on the street, like, please get rid of this tenant. This tenant is terrible. Like, this is a nice neighborhood. Like, please do something about this. So I called Jaron. I'm like, all right, dude, like, I don't normally do this. I don't evict people that pay rent, generally speaking, but like I rode by and it just looked horrible. And so I said, we're going to evict this person. And so we give them notice. We give them like 60 days to get out because they hadn't really done anything wrong. They're just a problem for the neighborhood. And so, they move out, no problem. And we go in there to get our property manager generally does our construction. And so we call them up. We're like, hey, this house needs to be turned. We'll probably just rent it again. Can you please get a crew out there and give us a quote? Well, month 1 goes by, no quote. Month 2 goes by, we're following up. Hey, can we get a quote? No quote. Month 4 comes by, still no quotes. And they're still promising like, yeah, we're getting to it. My bad. And
I will say, you shouldn't do this like me and Gaston did.
Right.
We have been successful to this degree where it's like one little house sitting vacant isn't killing us. Okay. If you're just starting out in real estate,
correct,
get the property flipped. We acted like idiots on this particular deal, on our deal. And our company that we work with, who's normally pretty darn good, failed us.
They dropped the ball.
They dropped the ball.
We weren't concerned because we also owned a trailer park at the time, and
making bank.
So we were cash flowing great on this partnership. This LLC's got plenty of money in the bank, and so it's not a concern. We'd rather just work with the people we normally work with. Well, it finally got to the point where it's just got to be done, and it's getting just worse and worse. And the only thing this crew did was go by and boarded
that. So it's a boarded house.
So it looks even worse than it ever did with the tenant.
It looks terrible.
And so I'm feeling like I'm going to get a death threat any day from the neighbors. And so thankfully, Jaron had a good family friend that's a contractor that was able to come in. And so we're probably 3 months into the project now, almost finished. And we're spending where we thought we'd spend $25,000. We're spending about $60,000.
Maybe a little bit more. I hadn't told Gaston about that.
Yeah, maybe I got a surprise coming after this.
Probably a little. You heard it here first. You're right. We'll be somewhere between 60 and 70 on the rehab. So we'll be all in at just call it 150.
Yeah. So and then we'll list the house just under 200,000 probably. And so we'll do fine on it. We'll do well.
We'll make 25 each, 20 each.
Yeah. And, we've probably got 50 of actual cash in it, maybe. So overall good return, but yeah, definitely a lesson learned on staying on top of contractors and driving by your properties. I think that's, if you live in the markets where you own properties, drive by them because you'll see limbs hanging over your roof. You'll see driveways are torn up. You'll see windows broken. You can tell when you've got problems that need to be addressed, and you're better off addressing them sooner rather than later.
Yeah. And if you don't live in the market, get somebody boots on the ground. Just do it. I mean, once a quarter. I'm not saying do it all the time. 4 times a year.
Well, and on that note, I would say don't nickel and dime your property manager. If you're in a different market, pay market rate or pay more than market rate. If they're charging 10%, say, look, hey, how about you charge 12%, but you drive by every single month and send me pictures.
Yep.
That money is very well spent in the long run.
That's a great idea. Plot twist on this house, and I want to talk about the rehab for a minute too. The guy who was living in there is now in jail.
Really?
Because he murdered someone.
Really?
Yep.
Good.
So I found out, I was over there managing. I didn't have to do much managing on the rehab, but I've been running point on it. I live in the town where we own this particular property, so it's easy. I live 10 minutes away, and so I was over there, and we had just started rehab. And this neighbor, I got approached by a number of neighbors by this point. You don't want to go by there. Just letting you know, just don't go by. I've handled it all.
Yeah, you're the guy.
These neighbors come up and they're like, "Do you own this place?" I'm like, "Oh God, here we go." I was like, "Yeah, I own it." I'm like, "Well, what are y'all doing with it?" I was like, we're gonna fix it up. And at the time, we didn't know if we were gonna keep it as a rental or sell it. When we really dug in, we knew we were gonna have too much money in it to keep it as a rental. Excuse me. So, we decided we were going to sell it. But at the time I'm talking to this guy, I don't know. And he's like, "Dude, well, do you know about the tenant that was living there?" I was like, "Nah, man, I don't know anything about him." He's like, "He's a murderer." I was like, "What?" And he didn't do it in the house. Right. Nothing happened in that house. He's like, "Yeah, he's in jail now." And what's interesting is his dad, was the same thing. And they lived in that neighborhood, maybe in that house years ago, or they're renting it. His dad lived in it when it was still a rental for years.
You're right. Yeah.
And so
interesting.
Anyways, to your point, the neighborhood is very thankful that we've turned around. Because really it's an unbelievably great neighborhood. It's where we grew up. It's the same neighborhood. I grew up, 2 streets over?
Oh, yeah. We were 7 years old riding our bikes by ourselves in this neighborhood.
Yeah, and so this house had just been kept as a rental for too long, and people didn't keep it up. And so, anyways, we got them out, and it was pretty cool. If you guys go to my YouTube, Finance Cowboy, I actually have some videos that I did walking through this property, and I'm gonna go through again once we get it completely finished. But we gutted it down to the studs. There was a whole deck in the back, completely took it down, and what we did is we turned it into, it was a 2-bed, 1-bath.
Yep.
And I took this like utility room in the back of the house and we turned that into half laundry, half full bath. And so now it's a 2-bed, 2-bath.
Yep.
And which is going to make it sell for a lot more. The hardwoods are being sanded and restained. Hardwoods all throughout the house. New drywall. It was in such bad shape. Granite on the kitchen. I think we just painted the cabinets. They were in decent enough shape. New showers, toilets, everything.
You name it.
And we did it.
And side note, this is right next to a college, a growing college. And so having a 2-bedroom, 2-bath versus a 2-bedroom, 1-bath is huge when it comes to, maybe somebody buys it for their kid to live in with a roommate.
Yep.
And it becomes a lot more desirable for college students.
Yeah. And we've already had 3 calls, people wanting to buy it. Like, we're not even done. And we've had 3 calls. So I don't think we'll have to list it.
Price is going up.
Yeah, it is. Hey, I got the 3 numbers saved. And as soon as we get it done, I'm going to go by there today after I eat. And as soon as we get it done, I'm calling them, say, hey, here's our price, $200K, make an offer. And one of them's already said we're paying cash. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, we'll knock it out. So for y'all listening, saying, well, why aren't you, it's a good area. You love the area. It's right near a college. Why aren't you keeping it as a rental? We put too much money in it.
That's right.
We put too much money in it. And so we're all in. We got a lot of cash in now, 50, 60 grand in. And so now our cash on cash return, unless we get that money back, has taken a sudden significant hit. And you're saying, well, why don't you just refinance it and keep it as a rental? Well, it would appraise, let's say it appraises for 200. I don't know if it appraises for that much, but let's say it does. That puts us at 160 on a note. And we have to have we got to have pretty much that to pay ourselves back.
Oh, yeah.
And so then your loan, now we got to get $1,600 a month in rent. It's not going to happen.
No, it won't support the rent. And of course, it probably appreciates over time, to a degree, being in a nice neighborhood. But it's not worth a negative cash flow to hang on to it when you've got other opportunities to buy.
Yep.
If we were in a situation where we couldn't find a deal anywhere else, maybe it's different. But, we're both in the game. We know that we can turn around if we pull out $150,000 from selling this house, then we know we've got places to put that money that we're earning 15, 20% versus, hey, I'm paying down some debt and I'm not really cash flow and I'm making 6% if I hold on to this house. So it's always opportunity cost. You got to look at what you can do. That's the way you always look at am I going to sell this house or not? Well, would I buy it for $200,000? And no, would I buy it for 180? No. All right. We need to sell it.
Yep. That's great. I hope you guys just listen to what he said. That is expert advice right there. Expert advice. And I get a lot of questions of folks asking me, they do that with their personal home. Mm-hmm. They own it and now maybe they don't have a note on it. And they're like, oh, I should keep it as a rental. I had somebody call me from work yesterday.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, run the numbers as a rental. And I told them how to run the numbers. It was, awful. Yeah. Awful returns.
That's a tougher conversation because so many people do want to do that. And part of it's you already know the house. Mm-hmm. Like there's no surprises. And so that makes it a little bit easier to do it. Maybe the return threshold isn't quite as high as, if you're just looking to buy a rental. But it's the same thing. It's, hey, I've lived here for 2 years. I can sell this house tax-free because the government lets you do that if you live there 2 out of the last 5 years. And so I can get all this money tax-free and then go buy rentals. Like if you compare the numbers, the rentals win selling wins every single time.
Yep.
Because of that tax benefit.
Smart. So it's very smart. Yep. Yeah, you still got to make the deal make sense. Whether you're buying in cash, whether it's a house you're moving out of, make the numbers make sense because there's better returns elsewhere. Why don't take bad returns because it's easy?
Exactly.
It's stupid. It's like investing in the stock market. Stop investing in the stock market. You get better returns in real estate. I bought some stocks this week because at the time of this recording, the SVB bank just went kaplunk. The Swiss credit bank's on its way down.
It's on the fritz.
And so
Signature Bank's gone.
Signature Bank's gone. I had some capital. I have access to capital for real estate. And so I had some other of my own capital. I was like, you know what? Blood in the streets. Let's dump some in there. So anyways, I can't, but it's just the returns are just no, you can make returns on a time like this, but compared to real estate overall, it's not even close.
It's a real estate podcast. I'm a big believer in real estate. That being said, lenders do want to see, some liquidity. And so, I keep a portfolio of stocks, for that reason. Yep. I'm not a big believer in, owning just my entire retirement in stocks.
You want to be bankable though,
but you got to be bankable. Exactly.
And if you're working a W-2, my messaging on Instagram and social media a lot is I appeal to the folks who have that job, have that family. You're bankable.
Yep. You're
bankable. Okay. Yep. So you having that liquidity, you still need to get some liquidity. Everybody needs some liquidity. Okay. So allocate a portion in liquidity. They count liquidity as 401ks at the bank too.
Yeah.
So if you have 401k, you're liquid. According to the bank. So, but if you have that full-time job, you're good. When you're doing things like Gaston and them are doing, they run their own business, and they're showing a lot of losses probably on a lot of their stuff. He's got to be able to get creative, and show, hey, I got money, like lend to me. Yeah. And, that's a really good point. I want to talk about house hacking real quick because you did it before, I don't even know if that was the name.
I didn't know what it was at the time.
It's how you got into real estate. Not how you got into real estate. It's how you really got into rental properties. And it is the easiest way for anybody listening to this podcast, especially if you're not married and don't have a family. So explain how your whole deal with it, kind of what it is, and how it helped you propel to being able to scale later.
Yeah. So I already mentioned my first property I bought, that rental house with my two business partners, or my two bosses. And so after this is, maybe 6 months after that, we were into this other neighborhood where we did the 50 house deal. And one of the nicest houses in this neighborhood was owned by this guy named Tommy. And so I'm riding the streets one day, Jake's pointing at houses, and, this guy Tommy comes up. I'm like, I know that name. And so I cold called Tommy and I said, hey, but what else do you own? And he's like, I own two houses over here and I own this house over here. And one of the houses was in this transitioning area. It's got really cool bones, great curb appeal. And I knew I could sell these other two houses to one of our investor clients. And so I did that. I sold the other two houses. That's what he really wanted to sell. And he didn't want to sell this one house that I really liked. And so I sold the two to my client, and I went back to him a couple weeks later. I'm like, Tommy, man, I really want this house. What's the deal with it? And he's like, well, it's a boarding house. I got it rented by the room. And the city, city's kind of on my butt. They won't let me do it anymore, but I'm kind of grandfathered in, but they call me all the time and it's starting to be a pain. So I said, okay, well, it sounds like a problem for you. You've just sold your other two houses. You don't have any other rental houses. Is now a good time to sell it? And he said, you know what? I think it is. And so I said, okay, great. What would you take for it? He said, $50,000. Oh my
gosh.
And I said, all right, you got a deal. And
notice he didn't hesitate right there. He was ready to go. Got to be ready to act.
You gotta, when you smell a good deal, you got to take it.
Go. And then figure it out.
Because that guy will go call his cousin that's a real estate agent, and she'll talk him into listing it for $75,000. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't know whether this house was worth 50 or 60 or 40 or what, but I just knew you couldn't find any other house for 50,000. And so I said, okay, we got a deal, Tommy. And so I get my dad. My dad's a lawyer, real estate lawyer. I get him to do the closing for me. And I talked Tommy. My mom was a real estate agent. I talked Tommy into paying her a commission to help me do the deal. And so Tommy's going to walk away with $48,000 or something like that. She was getting paid $1,200 or so. And so my dad shows up to my office to do the closing. And we're signing papers. I'm all excited. This is my first house that I'm actually going to live in. I'm moving in tonight. Like, this is good. Well, I hadn't done a final walkthrough. And matter of fact, when I'd walk through it, there was a couple rooms that I could never even see because they were rented by the room. They're padlocked. The guy wasn't home. But I just knew this was a good deal. And so I just kind of brushed it off and kept going. And so my dad, we're signing the deed. You know, he pulls out the deed. It's the last thing. And he said, "Tommy, is the house empty?" Tommy said, "Well, there's couple tenants still in there moving out." And my dad takes his binder, closes it up, says, "All right, you call us when they're out," and didn't give me a choice about it.
You got to know Sam.
Oh, yeah.
Sam is the attorney you want.
Ultimate protector of his client.
Ultimate.
And so I didn't argue with him. I was just crestfallen. But I'm like, okay. So we walk out of the building, and Tommy's like, "All right, I'm going over there right now. Like, we're getting rid of these tenants." And so sure enough, not a one of them was out. And so they're just throwing trash in the trash can. It's hanging out in the driveway. It's a disaster. It smells horrible. And so long story short, we end up closing the next day. So I move in that night, and I go to it's still transitioning area. So I go to the back bedroom. That's going to be my bedroom. I didn't want to be at the front door.
I've been to this house. It's
so
quite the
I realized
scene.
The day I move in, it's July, and it's hot. And there's no air conditioning. And I had no idea. There was no air conditioning. And I just spent my last dime. And there's a whole other story about getting a loan for $40,000 on this house, which is the only way I was able to do it. So I had $10,000 down on this house, and that was the last dime I had.
Oh, man.
And so come to find out, there was no air conditioning. And so I spent the whole first night just sweating, and it still smelled terrible, and it was just awful. And I'm like, I made a huge mistake. And so then I get my dad to loan me the money. It's the only money my dad's ever loaned me to get HVAC installed.
Wow.
So I get HVAC installed. And
did you do the mini split? You did
yeah,
mini
we did.
splits,
So yeah, that was a whole disaster.
I remember that.
The crawl space was so tight we couldn't get ductwork in the crawl space, and the attic was, back to house hacking, going to be a bedroom that I was going to rent to my buddy. So I couldn't put ductwork up there. I couldn't put the condenser up there, and so anyway, so finally got mini splits put in. It was kind of novel thing at that time to get mini splits.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And but it worked great, and so then I had a buddy moving in. He was in med school, and so I talked him into, gave him cheap rent. He painted the whole house, did kills everywhere, started smelling better. We painted the floors, we painted the ceilings, we painted everything. And so, you know, I ended up, I was paying my mortgage over 5 years because I had to beg and borrow to even get a mortgage. And so the guy's like, "Can you make, you know, advance payments instead of 20 years or 30 years? Can you do 5 years?"
Wow.
And I was like,
and they normally don't do it on loans that little either.
no, and normally they don't want to loan you $40,000 period.
Yeah.
And so I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." So it was like a $750 a month payment, you know, plus taxes and insurance and whatever. Might have been closer to $1,000. And so I had two buddies in there, and one of them was paying like $350, and one of them was paying like $275 because he's the one that painted, and he didn't want to pay for cable.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so I basically lived in this house for free for like 2 or 3 years, and then ended up renovating the entire thing and flipping it. And when I met my wife, and
because she didn't want to live there.
she did not want to live there, and so we bought the house next door to where she lived in a rental house. And so, but yeah, house hacking was huge for me because I lived, and this was second and third year of my career. And so I was making a little bit more money than I made the first year.
You were broke back then.
Oh,
I was broke too, so I'm not throwing shade.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I remember talking to you, but you were just like,
oh, I was broke as I could be. And
Yeah.
I was in the National Guard, as you mentioned, and that's really what kept me afloat. Was I was making a couple $100 on the weekends doing National Guard stuff.
Wow.
And I had made decent money at that school my first year in the business.
Yep.
And but we were eating, you know, we'd go every 2 weeks, we'd go to Sam's Club and we'd buy chicken and pork chops, chop them in half, and that was our meal for the next, you know, month. And
dang.
rice and chicken, and you change the side. You might do potatoes one day and rice the next day, but it was always chicken or pork chops. And my friends were in the same boat, my buddies that were living with me, and so we just made the best of it. We played cornhole on the front porch, and we had air conditioning, so
that's all you need.
We're good,
bro. You got a shell of a house, cornhole, air conditioning, your buddies. Like, what else?
Oh, it was so disgusting. We didn't even use the countertops; they were so bad. So I had plastic fold-out tables that I used as my countertops, so the roaches wouldn't get in everything.
Bro, I just remember the story. We don't have to go into it. Of you chasing your dog down that street that night. Oh my gosh, you had that party and your dog got out. I don't even know what the party was for. I think you were just having a get together on the weekend. I came up there and I just see you sprinting down the street yelling at your dog, and then your neighbors are yelling at you because you're being too loud. I was like, bro, this is about to get rowdy.
It was an interesting time. I could tell stories on that house for hours.
Did it help you at all? I mean, I know we use property management companies, both of us. We don't have time to deal with it. But did it just managing, just strictly that part of it, did it help you understand kind of how the ebbs and flows are, moving forward as you scaled?
Yeah, it definitely did. Having, buddies because we had our issues, as you do with any roommate or any tenant, to where you got problems that need to be solved. They're looking to you to solve the problem as the owner of the place. And, some are more reasonable requests than others, but yeah, you definitely learn. You're like, what do I do if he doesn't pay rent on time? And we both have buddies that have not paid us back when we've expected, when we've loaned us money.
It's a weird feeling.
It's a bad feeling. And renting to your friends is no exception to that, because they're going to be late. They're going to forget. They're going to run on hard times. Like, and we were able to work through that as friends. And, I was lucky to have really good roommates.
That's good. They're great guys.
But we still had our issues.
Oh, yeah.
And I definitely learned a lot from that. And I'll tell you what else I learned from that was in the midst of the neighborhoods we were buying in. And so, that was a way for me to connect with these people was, hey, I live right over here on Jenkins Street. And they're like, oh, really? What part of Jenkins Street do you live on? I'm like, I live in, the one that used to be a boarding house. And they're like, oh, Mr. Tommy's house.
Mr. Tommy.
And so it's just another great way to build trust and connect. And I think you would probably agree, that's the biggest key to sales in general, is building trust as quickly as you possibly can.
Yep.
And so living in that neighborhood, in that particular house, did that for me.
That's interesting. Then you're able to go buy a bunch more of the properties. You mentioned friends paying you back, people not paying on time. I remember when you first got me in, I tell this story a lot. This saying a lot. I don't remember exactly how you said it, but first off, you were clear that, hey, there's no guarantee that you're going to make money. We may lose money. Mm-hmm. And then second, there is enough money for everyone. Don't get greedy ever in these deals.
You want to walk away with a happy buyer, a happy seller, everybody's smiling.
Happy contractor, happy property manager.
Yes. And
happy friend, happy partner. We've never had one spout on any of our properties, ever.
Never. No.
And don't see it happening.
Because it's not worth the money. If you're doing it for the money, which of course you are as an investor, but it's a relationship game.
Yep.
And it's no amount of money is worth burning a bridge of a friend, a family member, an investor, a lender, a contractor. It's just, there's no amount of money that's worth it. And you want to walk away, everybody happy, everybody feeling like they won. And that's the definition of a good deal. It's not about how much money you make.
I love it. That was the best advice you ever gave me when I first started. And if you get into a situation to where you're doing deals with somebody friends or family, and there's starting to be friction and people are starting to get frustrated and it's starting to hurt your relationship, end the business deal there. If you lose money on it, whatever, who cares? End it, because like Gaston said, it is not worth hurting that relationship. Look, you can't take any of this money with you when you go. It's all a silly game we're playing until we leave this earth. Okay. But you can leave a legacy in how you treat people and how people remember you. And, so make sure we keep the first things first. That's one of the most important lessons you taught me. And it helped me with relationships, obviously, but also like not losing deals over something silly. My father-in-law said the same thing. He's like, there's been deals early on where, I really want to get it at 100 and they're wanting 104. He's like, buy the freaking deal.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Well, Jake's got a great saying on that. He's very just pro do the deal no matter what. Like if you buy, you win, which, works in most circumstances. But his saying is always, well, it's a couple more mortgage payments. If I'm arguing over $5,000 on a bigger deal, like it's a couple more mortgage payments. You're holding that house for an extra 6 months to be in the exact same position you're already in. Like, what's the big deal?
Bro, you're not on social media big. I wish you could see it because there's these guys. I'm not making fun of them because they're being successful investing. So it's not like they're not being successful, but they're getting on and they're preaching their methods for investing. And someone will talk about a minimum cash flow.
Oh gosh.
I'm not going to buy a long-term rental unless it cash flows $300. What?
Nah.
So you're telling me if you run your numbers and it only cash flows $100 a month, you're not okay with buying this hundreds of thousands of dollars of an asset with hardly any money down while tenants are going to pay your mortgage off for you and it's going to go up over time, but you're not going to do it because of $200 extra a month. Don't go out to eat 4 times.
Yeah, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Like what? Just old people. And
the reality is it doesn't cash flow $300.
No.
Like that's the reality is you don't ever count on any cash flow. Of course you underwrite it. You make, you put your assumptions in, you put your pro forma rent in, you do your debt assumptions. You hope that it spits out a positive cash flow on a spreadsheet. But the reality is, are you taking that $200 a month and you're doing anything with it? No, it's sitting in the LLC bank account and you're waiting for that next surprise. You're waiting till that house needs to be renovated and flipped. You're waiting till the HVAC busts. Like that's a reserve. And so of course it's real money, but you're not taking that and living off of it. And if you are, I would argue you're making a big mistake.
Bro, that's solid advice. People do not understand because they get fooled by people telling them things that wealth comes from the cash flow. Let me tell you guys where the wealth comes from. The wealth comes from buying and holding and barely putting any money in a deal, whether it's 0 or whether it's 20%, and then controlling a very expensive asset that goes up a ridiculous amount over time while somebody else pays it for you, while you're getting tax benefits. And now you have this big spread and you're worth millions of dollars like me and Gaston are, and you can go access those millions of dollars without having to pay taxes because you can do a cash out refi, or you can do a HELOC, or you can sell into a 1031 exchange. And now you're really wealthy and you're going to continue being wealthy because you're not having to pay Uncle Sam, and you're using the loopholes and you're using this asset to continue to buy more of these assets. That's only compounding. And now you're worth $2 million. Well, now you're worth $5 million 3 years later. Now you're worth $10 million 4 years later. That's where wealth, not $100 or $300 a month in cash flow. Don't let anybody fool you.
Amen.
Don't let anybody fool you. So how did y'all, and we'll wrap this up here, with a couple more questions, but I'm trying to think like our listeners. You and Jake talked about, or early on, you talked about Jake wanted to buy every house in this neighborhood, and then you hopped in and you started buying and y'all scaled. Mm-hmm. How do you fund that? We know how you found the deals. And I know there's a lot of different ways, but give us a couple, 2-3 main ways that y'all are able to fund building these portfolios.
The way we did it, which again, worked out really well for us, but maybe isn't the optimal way, but is a way, is we got partners. And there were deals that we would show up to the day before closing. We had no idea how we were going to close this deal, but we weren't telling the seller we were backing out. We weren't asking for extensions. We're like calling everybody in town that's got $10,000 and saying, hey, do you want in on this deal? This is a really good deal. Like, there was one guy that we bought his portfolio for about $1.8 million. It was like, I forget how many houses it was, but we needed $300-something thousand down at the time, and we didn't have it. And so I got a loan from somebody's IRA. We ended up with 12 people at the closing table because nobody had any more than $20,000, and so everybody's borrowing half their money, bringing half the money, and the seller walked in. He's just like, what is going on here? Like, I thought we were selling it to Gaston, but we're selling.
Y'all have formed an LLC?
You got 13 people at this closing table. It's the biggest closing table I've ever seen. And but there were deals, similar to that. I was 5% of that deal with my 25 grand that I borrowed. And there were other deals that I showed up to with with 30,000, I was 3% of. When we got into multifamily, like we were doing big deals and I just wanted in, I didn't care what my percentage was. I just wanted in. And so I'd show up with whatever money I could and I'd be 3% partner. And we had the benefit of working at a large brokerage company, one of the largest in the Southeast at the time. And so we brought in partners that worked with us, other shareholders of the firm, people that have been successful in real estate, and they believed in us. And we said, hey, you're doing, commercial deals. You're doing single tenant Starbucks investment sales. You don't have any exposure to houses or multifamily or commercial. Like, come invest with us, and then we'll invest. We'll turn around and invest with you. And so we did a lot of that. That's to where, cool. We just had people that believed in us, and we turned around and believed in them. And so we did it through partnerships. Which,
again, not getting greedy, not saying I got to have the whole deal. And to say, for folks who are saying, well, I'm not in the real estate community, I'm not a realtor like Gaston is. Okay, that's fine. You can still do the same. You do not have to be an agent or work in real estate. You got to start networking and go to your local real estate meetups. You got to get on Facebook groups in your hometown and the areas that you're investing in and start networking there, because you can do the same exact thing he did. If he wasn't, working at the brokerage at the time, they still would have found ways to find this money. Network through your family and your friends and your coworkers. Just start digging through every channel possible, and you'll come to a place where you got people who will give you money and partner with you.
And I'll repeat what you said: don't be greedy when you're doing these partnerships, because I could have easily said, I found this deal, I need 20% of the deal or 20% of the profit or whatever. And it's like, no, I'm happy to be involved. I'm gonna make my commission. I'm gonna make make sure it's worth your time, of course.
Yep.
But don't be demanding things. When you're in a position where you need money, figure out what the market is for that money and go get it.
I love it. I hope you guys are hearing what he's saying. Stop trying to make $1 million on every deal. Hit singles. We're baseball guys. Hit singles. Hit a bunch of singles. And then you're going to run into a bomb.
Sacrifice flies. Work fine.
Perfect. And then you'll run into those great deals. I mean, you've run into great deals. Our trailer park, to me, was a great deal. But how many singles did we hit before?
Exactly.
And our trailer park we bought it at, I don't remember what we bought it at, but it's cash flowing ridiculous. Only had to pay interest-only payments for a while, stacked the bank account up, and then sold it and just made, $70K each?
Yeah.
And we had it for 2 years?
For 2 years. It was a great deal.
That's at least a triple, maybe a home run.
And there's a lesson there, too, because that property was listed. And we bought it. It sat on the market. And we bought it for, 20% under what it was listed for. And we waited. And it was cash flowing. And we didn't have any designs on flipping it. But, there became a point where we're like, all right, we can go double our money real quick if we just flip it. But we bought that property. It sat there, and every investor in Greenville knew about it. And we bought it. And we made a bunch of money.
And we bought it creatively. People ask, how do you buy properties? Man, I've bought properties every way. You've bought them even more creative than I have. 20% down, other people's money, hard money. We got seller financing on this one.
Yeah, we did.
The seller held our note. And it was a good time that we sold it because we were broke. What people think, people see my net worth and that we're doing well, but me and you were literally talking on the phone like 3 days ago. We're broke. I don't have any money right now. I literally don't have, I tell my wife, I'm like, hey, we got to chill out this month because I just put a lump sum into the market. I just bought 2 rental properties at the end of last year, and I've got 4 on my board that I'm chasing right now. We're broke. And I sincerely mean that.
Oh, yeah. You loaned me the money. And it was about your last dime.
It was my last dime.
Yeah.
In the middle of this rehab of the property we were just talking about.
This guy needed an advance to buy materials that I didn't have the money. And Jaron did, but I think it about wore you out. The next time around, he's like, all right, it's your turn.
I was like, hey, bro, it's your turn to pick us up. Because you're like, hey, dude, I don't have any cash right now. You just bought a deal or invested in your fund. And I was like, hey, I got some capital right now. I don't remember what I had just done. I got money from somewhere. I don't know if I got a bonus from work or what. And I covered, this is literally 2 months ago. Yeah. And, we're both doing pretty well for ourselves, but we still live by the motto, stay broke, get rich. We do not keep cash. We just don't keep cash. Anytime me and you have cash, it is gone immediately. I guarantee you don't have the cash from the trailer park sale. I don't have the cash from the trailer park sale anymore.
It had a home the moment that money went hard. When the earnest money went hard, I went out and found a deal that I could go buy.
And we had 60 grand each. Some of y'all are listening like, oh my gosh, that's what I make in a year. That's what I use. That's more than I made my first 2 years of working.
Oh yeah.
And it was gone.
Oh, it's double what I made my first year. And, but you know, you learn that, hey, $1 invested in the real estate market equals $2, and $1 that's spent on Amazon is worth 50 cents. Like it's just gone. And so, you know, once you get into that mindset, it's very easy to say, all right, I'm living lean, I'm staying broke, but I'm investing as much as possible. And it pays off later. It's all a fun game.
Oh man, it fires. I'm about to literally just go drive around town and make offers on properties and do what we're talking about. Find somebody to lend me money. I'll probably be calling you this week. Hey, I call Gaston every time I need a lender. Like, hey, you know anybody who give me 100 grand right now? And then now my network's growing and people on Instagram want to, you know, lend to me. So it's great. You know, I can get a hold of some capital now. But you and Jake and your team, pretty much was you and Jake and one other guy. There's 3 guys when they started. Now they got a bunch of different, we don't have to get into all of, they got a bunch of different divisions, a ton of people working for them. But you guys, single family homes, that was where you started. A lot of people get, you know, what do I need to buy? I need to buy an Airbnb, I need to buy a duplex, whatever. I would just say not just single family, residential homes.
Residential.
And what I mean by residential is a single family home up to a quadplex, because the banks lend to those like they are a residential home. And you absolutely crush it. I remember we were sitting with Jake, you and Jake met in Greenville one time. And he was talking about how he bought residential homes because it appeals to the masses. Mm-hmm. And so many people get caught up on what's flashy and shiny right now. But it's so easy to buy those residential homes that appeal to the masses. Easy to get loans for. You usually get better tenants. And then the exit strategy, it gives you multiple exit strategies, which I love. You can sell to investors, which y'all do a lot.
Yeah, we do a lot.
You don't even hardly sell on the retail market, I feel like. Maybe you do, but
we do a lot of both. But yeah, that's why we loved it residential and specifically single family, was because of the multiple exit strategies. Like you could sell to another fund, you could sell to your buddy. I could sell property to Jaron, or I can put it on the market. I can put it on Zillow, realtor.com, and get the highest and best. Or I can just keep renting it, or I can do rent to own. I can owner finance. There's 1,000 different ways that you can get out of a single family home.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that's a need for people, you know.
It's the American dream.
It's the American dream to own a house. And there's other sectors of real estate that are not needs, that are, you know, wants.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And so single family, though, it's even more so than a multifamily, you know, apartment or duplex is, people need it. They got families, they got kids, they need a yard to run around in.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's the American dream. It's you can't beat it, especially when you're starting. Speaking of, you said, I could turn around and sell it to Jaron. Let me tell you guys a quick story. This man that you're listening to on this podcast or you're watching on YouTube taught me everything I know about buying rentals. I mean, I listened to podcasts, read books. I'm sure I picked up some stuff there, but 90% of my knowledge, especially how to find and underwrite deals, comes from Gaston. And so I'm so thankful. But the problem that he has run into is they will then try to sell me deals down the road that he owns maybe in another LLC, and he'll send me the price that he wants me to buy them at. And then I will take the calculator that he helped me put together and I will analyze it like he taught me how to analyze it. And the numbers don't check out. And then he has the audacity to get mad at me because I don't buy it because he wants to get rid of it because he needs the money for something else. This is a real life scenario that happened a couple months ago. And I'm like, okay, be mad at me all you want, but it's your freaking fault. Like you created this beast over here.
Hey, you made the best decision for you. I ended up selling it to another investor.
Yes.
And
I'm sure it was great for them.
So I won. That guy will win. Jaron will win because he was able to use his money towards something that fit his model better. And Yeah, getting mad about it's of course a joke, but
Yeah, he wasn't actually mad.
I was giving him a hard time.
It was funny though.
But yeah, I'm like, I'm trying to make you a really good deal. This house is worth 130 grand. I'm trying to sell it to you for 100.
Bro, the problem is I have a property on the same street that I had just got appraised for less than what you were wanting to sell it to me for. And I think it was bigger. And I'm like, and you didn't have central HVAC. That was like my big kicker. But I will say, number one, I'm giving him a hard time. If you guys knew the price that he was selling this to me, the fact that you can buy a dwelling for this amount, it would have been a fine deal. I'd have made a bunch of money in the long run. So I'm just busting his chops here. But the tenant there was awesome.
Yeah.
The coolest guy ever. Like, he invited me to come. He has bonfires every Friday night.
Yep.
He's like,
yeah, he's like the sheriff of the neighborhood.
Yes.
He's the mayor.
He is the mayor. It's cool. But anyways, so y'all did the single family home. But what's cool about what y'all are doing now, I want you to speak on it as much as you like, is y'all, I think you still have like, a personal portfolio if you find a good deal. I know you've tried to consolidate. You had a lot of these partnerships, which made you very wealthy. But now I think you try to consolidate down because now most of your money is going to these funds that y'all have started. So tell the folks about the funds you guys manage.
Yeah, so probably 4 years ago, we looked at ourselves in the mirror and we said, we're broke. We've been broke for the past 5 years buying properties. We've got all these investors, we've got all these partners, but like the amount of time we're spending on managing property managers, dealing with bank accounts, doing K-1s for these investors, and we're spending all this time on all these different LLCs, and it's confusing, and there's not a great way to allocate who gets what deal, and we're not getting paid. We're managing all these deals after we close on them for our investors for free. And there's a lot of value in that, and that's what we signed up for. That's cool. We'll live it out, but let's not continue to make this mistake for the rest of our career. And so we kind of got the bright idea that, hey, we'll make a fund. And we didn't know what a fund was, really. Like, there were a couple funds in Greenville that had been successful, and we kind of knew the idea of it, but we didn't know the ins and outs. And so we created a partnership LLC that we went and got 25 investors, and we raised $1,850,000, and we put it all in this thing. We thought we were really smart, and we said, we'll charge 2% of cash flow. 2% of gross rents. That's our asset management fee, which is, we didn't punch the calculator. That ended up being like $100 a month. So it still wasn't worth our time.
But at least it wasn't too big of a fund.
It wasn't zero anymore. And so we did well on that. We were focused on single family homes. We bought 20 something homes with that money. And we've since sold a couple homes. We've, reinvested into storage and some other commercial opportunities, and some land and all kind of stuff. But that money didn't last us long. We kind of figured out pretty quick $1,850,000 wasn't a lot of money with the amount of deals we were doing. And so then we turned around and did it again. We got a little bit smarter on our asset management fees. We charged a little bit more, charged based on actual capital invested, which is what most people do. And we raised $2.5 million. And at this point, it started kind of getting fun. And we're like, all right, suddenly I'm making a little bit of money every month for managing these funds. Our investors are incredibly happy. We're sending out 10% returns every single year. We're doing distributions. The investors are calling us back, wanting to invest more. And so then we got real smart. We're like, all right, let's figure out what an actual real estate fund is. And so I called a lawyer, and I still didn't know anything about anything. And I called this lawyer. I'm like, hey man, like, I invested in this fund that a friend of mine has. I've got the paperwork. Like, is there any way we can replicate this? Because I'm not stupid, right? I'm going to use somebody else's material. And so he's like, yeah, send it to me. We'll get it cleaned up. We'll do the SEC filings. We'll do everything. And so that's, we kind of said we need to put some resources into the back end. We need to report better. We need to do our tax returns better. We hired an accountant, an in-house bookkeeper. We started building out our infrastructure a little bit better, and we were able to take that and tell that story and go raise $13 million.
Wow.
And so
I invest in that fund.
Yep, you were a proud investor in that fund, and so we've done very, very well on that. We're 2.5 years into that fund, and we started doing quarterly distributions. We bought 200 and something houses. We bought some storage. We bought some industrial. We bought and flipped some land. We don't currently own any land, but we did several land flips that did really, really well. And now we're taking those houses, selling them off, and reinvesting into other things, more commercial opportunities. And so, but yeah, the fund is what I enjoy doing. I love doing deals. I'm transactional by nature, but I'm always broke. So, I don't want to stress myself out by continuing to buy properties with my own money. And, and then we wanted to scale. We had a 20-something person team that we were trying to support. And so obviously it's different if you're doing your own deals, you're trying to get to a certain, return for a lifestyle business for yourself.
Yep.
But my goal was to scale. And so we figured out scaling was relatively easy doing a fund structure. And so that's what we've done. We're now on our 5th fund. We're currently raising right now, hoping to raise $20 million. And it's been fun. I've learned a lot. It's been 90% fun, 10% pain, which I would say is better than average. And
Yes.
We've learned a ton. We've gotten better every time. We now have a couple of investor relations people that are doing all the reporting for every fund. We've still got our accountant. We've got a guy that fundraises. All he does is raise capital. And then we've got our deal team that are out there hustling, finding deals, doing what I did.
Yep.
And then we've got an analyst. And so now we're able to take their deals. They can focus exclusively on finding deals. They don't have to go take the JD class and figure out how to analyze something because we got this analyst.
They got it.
And so they can use their entire resource of time towards finding deals, and this guy can analyze the deals and send them to me. And so it's great. So we're focusing now on land and industrial properties right now for the same reason we liked rental houses. We like small industrial warehouses because of the multiple exit strategies. And, tons of different types of tenants, tons of different businesses that can go in there. And, lack of new supply. Nobody's building small warehouses. They're building monstrous ones, which was similar to the houses. They were building houses, but they were building $300,000 houses, not $100,000 houses.
In that market on those houses, when you play in the $100,000 to $200,000 range, you're just so secure.
Yeah.
It's probably the same with those warehouses. You're secure.
You just can't go down.
Yep.
Can't go down.
Dude, that's awesome. It's cool just to see. I've watched your guys' journey unfold, and you've told that story throughout this podcast, and we talked about hitting those singles. Y'all started with 3 of you in 2014 buying single-family homes. Yep. It's 2023, and now you have graduated into raising millions upon millions of dollars. But for the last, call it 10 years, y'all been building the foundation, even with your funds. First one was 1.8. Second one was 2 point something. Then you're like, okay, let's bump this up to 13. Now you're at 20. I mean, what do you think? 5 years? I guarantee you guys will be raising over $100 million.
I hope so. And, we had to build our reputation. We had to do things the right way. We had to call back angry investors that didn't like our reporting. We had to fix it. We had to do different types of deals. We couldn't, to raise that kind of money, we wanted to be opportunistic, where a lot of these funds are, all right, I'm a Grant Cardone multifamily fund, and that's it. We wanted to be able to do any deal that we liked that met our metrics. Mm-hmm. And, if we can make a 20% return on something, we want to buy it. We're still hustlers, and, we don't want to just build a machine. And so it's been fun. That's made it harder, but we've been able to do office buildings. We've been able to do warehouses. We've been able to do storage, land, houses, multifamily, you name it. We've done it all. And so now we've got this reputation of, generalists, but really good generalists, which I think is a niche in the market.
That's really cool. And so for people trying to who have no idea about funds, we're not going to get into the details, but like what Gaston will do, tell me if I'm wrong, just so everybody has like somewhat of a grasp on how this works. Investor will invest. Gaston and them raise $20 million. They will then take the $20 million, and that will, in theory, the majority of it will be used as down payments. So then they can go leverage more at the bank. So if you got 20 mil for a down payment, that gives you access to what at the bank?
Yeah, we can go, right now 80? Banks are tight, so we're probably buying $60 million worth with $20 million.
I mean, that's solid.
Yeah, you're probably getting 65% LTV, but you're able to do $60 million worth of transactions, which is massive.
And y'all broker those a lot.
We broker them, so we get commissions.
We manage them.
We've now got our in-house management company. We merged with a property manager who is a friend of ours.
And then your GP, your general partners too. So you're getting. Yep.
So we're getting the fund. We're getting asset management fees. We're getting property management fees. We're getting commissions.
And then as an investor, I'm getting returns. I looked at the rap sheet not long ago, and it's like, bro, we're crushing it.
Yeah, we're crushing it, and we're not being greedy about it too. We're charging market rate fees.
Yep.
We're giving other brokerages opportunities to give us deals. We pay out a broker bonus anytime somebody brings us a deal. They get a 1% bonus, and we're offering that to every firm in town, so that we get deals from everybody, not just our in-house people. And because our first and foremost goal is to make our investors money.
Are you guys allowing? I think I know the answer to this, but there's going to be people listening to this who want to know the answer. So I'll let you be able to clarify it on air, so you don't get a bunch of random emails. Are you allowing investors that you don't know on this fund? Or are you keeping this one tight for the 20 mil?
So we're a friends and family fund. We're it's all based on our contact list. We've got an extensive list of investors, and we are not set up to take capital from random people. Yep. As much as we would love to at some point. We're a friends and family by design, by nature, by choice, and we just like doing business with people that we like. And there's a saying that our old CEO used to say, which is "Don't do shit for jerks," and we live by that. Like, if we don't know you, we'd love to get to know you, but we don't live and die by the dollar. And
that's awesome.
And so we'd like to get to know you, and like make sure that our fund meets your goals, and then we'll love to talk after that.
I love it. Yeah. So don't blow them up. Tell them, hey, I want to give you $50,000 to invest in this fund. You have to be an accredited investor to invest in funds in general. If you are listening to this and you have tons and tons and tons of money, Gas will probably want to get to know you. If you're like me and you're like, I'll put 50 grand in, maybe send an email, tell them you enjoyed the podcast, but don't blow them up about.
I'll take your 50. I like
you. Take my 50. I'll give it to you. Maybe I don't want to say that on air, because he may hold me to that. Even if in this fund, it may be the next fund. I just told you I don't have any money right now. That's the only problem. But no, they crush it. Like I said, I was in their first big fund, and it's great. I know what these guys do. I've watched them for 10 years. And so I know what kind of deals you guys are getting. And I'm like, you can't go wrong with them. So what advice would you give to our listeners? Somebody who hadn't bought that first property yet. I want you to talk to two people. Hadn't bought it, and then maybe they have one or two and they hadn't scaled. What tips?
Yeah, so if you haven't bought a house, you're sitting on go, you've got the down payment, you've got the lendability, then I would encourage you to educate yourself as much as possible. That's the first step, is educate yourself, make sure you're comfortable, as comfortable as you're going to get. But then you have to know that the only real way to get comfortable is to just do it. And so you want to make sure you know what you're doing. You got your team in place. A contractor. A property manager. Somebody that can answer some questions. A good real estate attorney, good accountant. Educate yourself and build out your team. But then you got to get off the dime. You got to just do it, and not to the point of what a lot of these people will say on Instagram, which is buy and wait and you'll get rich. Like, have a little bit of science to it. Make sure you're in a good neighborhood and a good market. But don't be afraid to buy the $32,000 house. Don't be afraid to say, all right, if I lose this 10 grand, my life's over. Like, reality is, yeah, it would sting if you made a bad deal on your first one, but you'll come back from it. And you'll learn from it. And the best way that you can actually learn is to make mistakes. And, that first house that we had, we finally went in, a year after closing, the tenant moved out, and you could have rolled a marble on the floor and it would have whirlpooled. Like, the floors were so bad, but we did fine on it. We made it work. We rented it out again. So, don't be afraid to make a mistake. Don't get in over your head, of course, but if you've got the cash to lose, and if your risk is your cash, risk it all. Risk your cash. Don't risk your reputation. Don't risk your lendability. Don't be stupid about it. But cash is a replaceable resource. And so I would encourage you just to jump on it.
Wisdom.
And then if you're somebody that has bought a couple, you don't know whether you're ready to scale or not. You're sitting there saying, I've burned through my cash. I've made a little bit of money, and I'm just like, I'm happy where I am. I don't want to risk anymore. I don't want to lose what I got. I know that's a hard position to be in. But I think this is my personal opinion, that if you own 2 rental houses, you're in a very precarious situation unless you have a really good full-time job, good income on the side, because that roof can come at any moment. That HVAC can come at any moment. The fire can come at any moment. And the pipes burst and insurance covers 75% of it, but not 100% of it. Like, these things happen, and you need to have more scale in order to survive things like that. And so you've made the first step. You've done the right thing. You've got a couple. I would encourage you, get more. You already know how to do it. Just rinse and repeat, and you'll be happy once you get to that scale number.
I love it. Man, that's great advice. This is why I still call this guy when I'm looking at deals to make sure I'm not doing anything stupid. Gaston, it's been awesome having you on, and I'm glad to have you here in studio. A lot of these people I have to interview, virtually, because they're all over the place. So
I'm happy to be here at the estate.
Yeah, welcome to the estate. I tried to get him to play me in tennis today, but he came up with some excuses. So anyways, but no, seriously, dude, thank you so much for being on. If you are listening to this right now, take a screenshot of you listening to it and post it on Instagram on your story, and tag me at Finance Cowboy, and tag Gaston at Galbergotti. So that's at GALBERGOTTI. And just let us know you were listening. We would love to both thank you personally for taking time out of your day to hear what we have to say. And I know for a fact that you guys learned a ton in this episode. This was an action-packed episode. So Gaston, again, bro, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Yeah, dude. We'll do it again.